Hi, my name is Franka-Maria Andoh, and this is my new podcast called The Three Lemons. The Three Lemons is about creatives who take things that are normally plain and boring and make them into exciting, beautiful things that people can enjoy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Three Lemons podcast. My name is Nana Machamating. I am your guest host for today because our fantastic guest, Franka-Maria Andoh, is actually being interviewed today. Hello, Franka.
Hi, Nana.
How are you today?
I am so happy to be here.
Wonderful. So today's episode is very special because we are here to talk about the Antique and Garden Show, which is Franka's baby. The idea was birthed by Franka, and so Franka, please tell us, what is the Antique and Garden Show?
Okay, so firstly, just to clarify, there's an Instagram page called Antiques and Garden for an event that was happening in Nashville, Tennessee. I hope I said that correctly.
Yes.
So that was happening. That actually happened earlier this year. And I shared it with my creative director. She thought, wow, it'd be a good idea to have an event like that here where we could sort of merge antiques and things to do with gardens and create something interesting, especially connecting to our antique lemonade concept store. Unfortunately, my creative director wasn't well. And so at the time when she was recuperating, I thought it was a really good idea. And I thought, I don't see why we can't do it. We said April, let's stick with the plan and let's go for it. So I think that's when I kind of like really sat down and tried to put ideas together and also reached out to people that I felt were like-minded and everybody, God being so good that I spoke to, loved the concept, loved the idea, and we're looking forward to some good times ahead.
Wonderful. So tell us, so what is the creative idea behind it, though? Why antiques and gardens?
Okay, so basically, I like old things. I've always liked old things. I think because my parents had me when they were a little too old to be having children. So I grew up around old furniture. I grew up around, old radios, old televisions, black and white television, stuff like that. And I found that when I got to a point where I could travel to the UK, not as a student, but as a grown working or entrepreneurial person with my own little money, I would find myself at yard sales and flea markets, and I'd be picking up, all kinds of stuff. One of the things I was collecting very avidly at some point were teapots. Like I was collecting old teapots, unless I didn't see a teapot, I had to go in my suitcase. But I also felt like in those days, things that were made with a certain level of craftsmanship and a certain pride. Like if you're a carpenter, you made a chair, you made a desk. You wanted that desk to last generation after generation. Whereas right now, we are doing things so that they'll get spoiled quicker, so that the person will come back and buy another one. And I feel like antiques remind us of who we used to be. And not to say we should go back to caveman days, but I think that there's some values about work and about making things and about creativity that antiques for me, it's just a reminder of what quality meant, what it meant to make something and have your name attached to it, how you could hand something from generation to generation. And because I'm a storyteller, even more importantly, some of the beautiful stories behind pieces of furniture, a couch that, your grandfather may have proposed to your grandmother in, antiques tell stories.
They do.
And so for me, I thought, why not antiques and gardens, because I love flowers. I love my garden. And I always say that I would prefer to live in a house in a garden than an expensive apartment. Because when I come out of my house in the morning, the flowers by themselves are a real big reminder of what I am as a person, what I have to be grateful for. God's bounty, God's creativity, and the wellness that nature brings. And I think also being in a country where we don't really necessarily respect our environment, because if you look at, you're sitting in a car and looking outside, there's not a lot of green. It's more like plastic bags and, it's even more important that we understand the importance of gardens and green space and beautiful spaces in just uplifting us as human beings. So that's the reason between the two things kind of coming together.
I like that. Now, you talk about, antiques sort of tell a story and take us back, and wanting to do this in Ghana. So now bringing it to Ghana, what are some of the sort of Ghana things or cultural things that you're adding, or touches, if you will, that you're adding on it to make it a Ghana story, right?
I think that's a very important question. And for example, on the first night, we're going to be having a vintage movie night. The vintage movie night is going to feature a classic Ghanaian movie. Now, without kind of doing spoiler kind of thing, that movie reminds us of who we used to be. That movie reminds us of what Accra looked like, how clean Accra was. That movie reminds us that we had an airline. So it's a classic movie, it's a vintage movie, but it's also a reminder of the fact that at some point we had things that we don't have anymore. So it forces us to be reflective and to really think about whether we have actually moved forward, or are we sort of further back than we were in those times, or have we just stood still?
Wow.
So, all things bring stories, and stories also have always been an important way of us sharing our history. Our history has always been an oral history, where you have grandmothers telling you things about family, and what triggers these stories. It could be like a chopping board.
Yeah.
That would trigger a story. She's like, oh, I remember when I first bought this chopping board, and So I think it's more to do with nostalgia and reminiscing and reflecting and really thinking about who we are now and what have we lost, and how can we maybe go back to some of the really good things, like being gracious, like being respectful, like being truly hospitable. Because even though we say we're hospitable, I mean, the fact is we're not. So, it's just a reminder, and also to bring the young ones to realize that this is who we were. We were beautiful people, we were respectful people. We had issues, but we had values. And it'd be good for us to go back and find some of these things and sort of revive them into our societies. And we will be much better for it.
Ah, that's so great. So that's just day one.
That's day one, yes.
Vintage Ghana movie. Can you tell us about the rest of the days and how they...
Now, to go back to day one, we're also going to have two Anansesem stories.
Oh, wow.
We're going to have two storytellers. And these are two stories that I wrote. Oh. And even though they're based on the typical Anansi character who's mischievous and basically a village 419er.
Very naughty.
I've made the stories quite contemporary.
Okay.
And quite relevant to some of the issues that we face currently. And we've also interspersed some live music with it, because your typical Anansi story always comes with songs.
Nice.
And music and dancing. The old ladies will always stop in the middle and, get the kids going, clapping, and,
Right.
And also it's about community. And we're trying to create a community of people who will sit and listen and enjoy and feel a sort of friendship towards people they don't even know, just because they've sat in one place and done something that they've enjoyed. Because I also feel like we've lost community. We've really lost community. We're now a cliquish people, but we've lost community. And in those days when if your child was doing something, somebody else could say, Kwikwana and his daughter, behave yourself. You can't do that anymore. You know, because everybody's trying to stay in their corner. And we've also become very competitive. So everybody wants to do well, wants their kids to do well. And we're not necessarily interested in what's happening in other people's lives.
That's true.
And all this is a reminder of these are values that really, really did a lot. Why are parents the way they are? How can we have all these people like Kofi Annan? They were all raised here. How did they do so well?
Right.
I mean,
And
something must have been, something must have been done right. So let's go back and find that thing and see if we can get ourselves back on track.
I see. So, I get the feeling, the underlying theme, which is, going back to sort of where we were and who we are as Ghanaians is very important to you. So elaborate on that a little bit. Tell us and why you think that this generation needs to be reminded of that, because it's a very sort of rare concept. A lot of events now are just really about the here and now. We're showcasing this, we're showcasing this new artist, this new fashion, this new, this new Ghana, if you will. But you're really kind of passionate about showcasing, core Ghanaian values, how it used to be. Tell us why that is so important to you.
I mean, one of the things that I want to say is we've lost, for example, language. Like most of the children cannot speak their mother tongue. And I always use this example that if you met a French boy, a little French boy in France, and he was called Jean-Pierre, and you said, "Ça va?" and he said, "I don't speak French," you would think that was ridiculous.
Yes, for sure.
So in the same way, how is it that you're called Abana and I say it to saying and you tell me you don't speak your own? Now when you've lost your mother tongue, what do you have that identifies you, that roots you to where you're from? And it's almost like bougie not to speak your mother tongue.
Terrible.
I mean, why are we having so many lifestyle diseases at the moment?
Right.
The way we eat has changed. And I'm as guilty as everybody else.
Sure.
I mean, I'm ordering from Pizza Hut. So, my grandmother lived up to 91.
Wow.
She was going around the garden plucking these little herbs, grinding them. They looked awful. They smelled awful. She would drink it. And she could walk from here to Christ the King.
Look at this.
At Flagstaff House.
Wow.
At like 80-something.
Wow.
Now, by the time you're 40, you're already having aches and pains. You're having hypertension. I mean, have we really stopped to ask ourselves why? Why are people getting all these lifestyle diseases so early? So I feel like it's important that we I'm not saying we should go back to not using blenders, but certainly if we're losing things like our recipes, like how we used to cook, at some point what will we have?
True.
So that's why I think it's important that in as much as we want to move forward, it doesn't mean we should totally erase our past, because our past informs
Our
our present
and our future.
and our future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very true. Thank you for that. Now, can you tell us some of the other events that will make up the Antiques and Gardens show?
So on the second day, we're going to have a vintage tea.
Oh, wow.
And so it's
vintage tea.
A vintage high tea.
Vintage high tea.
Yes. So,
definitely explain that to us.
So that we're going to be having at Flair Catering.
Flair
Catering is not far from Christ the King or Waek. And it amazes me when I say to people, do you know Flair? And they tell me they don't. Because Flair Catering is the foremost catering company in the country. It's established in 1968.
Wow.
And the owner, Madame Barbara Baita, catered for every single president since Dr. Kwame Nkrumah.
Wow.
She's catered for Barack Obama.
Wow.
Catered for Prince Charles.
Wow.
Now King Charles.
Yes.
Catered for the Queen. Actually, the equerry to the Queen was born on her compound.
Wow.
So that's a historic building.
Very much so.
That's a building with stories. That's a building that should be like, for example, Martin Luther King's building in Atlanta.
Yes.
Which is now somewhere that people go to learn more about this great man.
Yeah.
But we seem to be moving very quickly onto new things.
Yeah.
And we're not documenting, anchoring these amazing people, these amazing stories of her first catering gig. $100 was a U.S. naval crew that came that she catered for.
Wow.
Her first loan was from Barclays Bank.
Wow.
And that's because her father had taken her to Barclays Bank at age 10 or so to start saving.
Wow.
So if you're a parent and you're listening to this, would it not inspire you to think, it might be a good idea for me to get my 10-year-old to start saving now?
Yes.
Because at some point, those savings, that reputation, might be able to help that child or that young adult to get a loan to start a business, or even to start a business
Yes.
based on some good savings that they've done. So I feel like there's so many lessons to be learned from places and people, and we're sort of moving on to the next flashy venue, flashy location, and we're just kind of leaving things behind and leaving our own stories and our history behind. And at some point you ask yourself, who will the young people look up to? And that's why they're looking elsewhere for inspiration, because we've given them the impression that they really keep moving because there's nothing here to look at. And I think that there's a lot here to look at.
Definitely.
And that's one of the key, focus points for this event. So the high tea, we're talking a bit about the history of flair. We're also going to have some workshops, just teach people about how to grow herbs in their own little kitchen space.
Nice.
And also, if you're having like a dinner or a little party, how you can get a few flowers together, create a nice centerpiece without having to go and pay beaucoup money. As you know, we are in challenging times.
Yes.
So these are all things that help us to live better lives, economical lives, but not to totally give up on the little pleasures as well.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. All right. So that's day 2.
Day 2.
Day 3.
Now, day 3, we're calling a picnic in the park. We're looking at a Sunday event where we're going to encourage families to come and hang out. Lots of kebab, lots of drinks, bouncy castles, things for the kids to do.
Nice.
And also antiques for them to look at. Nice. All things that they can look at and have conversations with the owners about the stories behind some of these pieces. We're also going to have some workshops. We have 4 guest speakers coming to talk about, again, wellness, gardens, things that you need to do to keep yourself healthy. We have really good speakers, but we're looking forward to that aspect of the program, because for us the underlying reason for this also is knowledge. We want to give knowledge, we want to share knowledge. We'll also have like a walk in the garden where those who are interested will be taken through what I would call a commercial garden, so they can ask as many questions as they want.
Very
they
nice.
can buy plants, they can buy pots, to go home and beautify their houses and create spaces that they can enjoy, because if you're going out and the space outside is not conducive, then by all means, within your own 4 walls, you can also create a space that is conducive for you, it's inspiring for you, it's creating a sense of wellness and well-being for yourself and for your family as well.
Which is very important for all of us in these times, as you say.
Absolutely.
Very nice. Now, what are some of the antiques? Can you tell us some of the antiques that will be showcased on that day? Okay, so I'm for sure we're going to have some vintage cars. One of the cars that we call Sierra is a 1968 Mercedes. Wow.
The same model was used in one of the Bond movies, Octopussy.
Wow.
It was brought to Ghana by a doctor from Germany. He sold it to a pastor.
Wow.
Who sold it to a gentleman.
Wow.
Who sold it to me.
Wow. I like that.
So she's going to be on display, as well as other vintage vehicles of different age, different models, furniture, books, things like recipe books like Good Housekeeping, which was the recipe book in the 60s.
Sure.
So a range of things like old radios, typewriters, just things that bring back like some good memories. some good stories,
Right.
and some inspiration, especially for creatives who always need, I call refueling.
Right.
And so all these things create a bit of refueling.
Inspiration.
Inspiration, that's correct.
I see. Wow, so day 3 sounds very exciting. And then the last and final day, day
The
4.
last and final day, we're going to be having a sandwich festival.
Oh, wow.
That's going to be hosted by Josie's Cappuccino.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Crust Festival, and it helps us to explore different exciting fillings for sandwiches. It's usually like a fun event, a big family event with games like board games or Wari Ludo,
Nice.
some good music.
Nice.
We're also going to have some vendors. We're only having vendors for 2 days, which is the picnic in the park and also the sandwich festival. And then hopefully in the evening we're hoping to have a fashion show.
Wow.
And the fashion show is going to be using a lot of vintage fabric to create contemporary looks.
Great.
So just also to showcase how you don't always have to go and buy new fabric. You might have some piece of fabric that your mother left you, your grandmother left you lying around. You can use it to create something interesting. And actually it just gets you closer also to somebody that you've loved, that you've lost. And a lot of the fabrics from the old days are more hardy, more durable, better quality.
Yes.
And it's something that you can hand on, can be a family heirloom.
Yes.
So that's the theme of the fashion shows, like vintage, upcycling, and still being fashionable, but, like not being wasteful,
I see.
about it. Yes.
I see. Very
Because
good.
the underlying thing also is about us sustaining our environment and looking out for our environment and taking care of our environment.
Who are some of your partners for these events?
Okay, so as I said, it's our first event. First time we've done anything like this. And so obviously we don't have a track record. So it would be difficult to approach corporates to say, look, would you be interested in sponsoring this? So we want to kind of do something that's of excellence, something that's beautiful. And next year we'll be able to take what we've done and talk to some of the big guys and see if they'll be willing to support us.
Sure.
But saying that, we've really been blessed. God's been good in that most of the individual creatives that we've approached from different walks of life have all really bought into this idea.
Great.
So I would say that we have individual partners who are creative, bring their varied creative gifts to the table. And it's been amazing because even on social media, we've had people approach us and say, we love the idea of what you're doing. How can we be a part of this? And we'll say, what do you do? They would say, well, I'm a social media, person. So we would normally ask you, like, what do you bring to the table? And not necessarily financially, but in terms of gift. Because I'm also a big believer, as much as I've been burnt, as creators, and particularly as African creators, because we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
The importance of coming together and, having that energy and using that as a way of, moving, with such projects as what we are working on now. Because it's amazing how you might put something out and somebody will come up with this brilliant suggestion on how it can be done better. As opposed to you being a one-man band playing all the instruments.
It's true.
And we seem to prefer that, like one-man glory. Whereas, somebody said to me recently, I heard recently, somebody said the word chobwe, chobwe, and they say, it's like multiple people taking something that looks and is quite heavy, but because they are doing a heave-ho, they're able to carry, and it's like ants.
Together.
How do ants carry other insects that are bigger than they are?
Yeah.
Because they understand how to work together to do things that on their own, as one ant, there's no way you'll be able to carry that to your corner and go and have a snack with it, And I think that we need to start thinking like that a bit
Right.
more. And so what we're trying to do this event, I call it the big creative collaboration, is to have creatives come together and do this and do it well. And let me be an example that it can be done. And every year as creatives, we want to come together again and put another beautiful 4 days together for people to enjoy. Because the other thing is, what is the point of being a creative? Is to do things that people can enjoy.
Sure.
Because if you do it and you're in your house enjoying it, what use is that?
Exactly. Yeah.
So we also have to ask ourselves, what is our role? Why do we have the gifts? Why do you have the gift of writing?
Sure.
Why do I have the gift of writing?
Right.
Why does somebody have the gift of visuals, of being able to capture image? So if you have it on your computer in your house and nobody's looking at it,
what's the purpose?
What's the purpose of the gift? And I think once you understand that as a creative, the money is important, but the gift is more than the money, because the gift never really goes away, but the money can get finished.
Yes.
True. So,
wow. This has been really great. So you've told us about, what the event is about, what's going to kind of happen in the 4 days. What's your final word for attendees? You talked about, families can come, they can bring their kids, but what would you say to, the lay person on the street, why they should attend the event?
I think for me, the intention of something is always important. And the intention of this event is simply knowledge, nostalgia, wellness. Coming to any of the events or all the events, we want you to walk away with new knowledge, with a better understanding of who you are, not just as an African, but as a Ghanaian. Because that's the root of everything. Recognizing who you are, having a sense of pride, not arrogance, but pride in who you are, the color of your skin, your language, your food, being settled in that, but also having an appreciation for people of other colors, other foods. And that's where the antiques also comes in, because it's an appreciation of other, but starting with an appreciation of self, an understanding of self, a love of self. And I think sometimes I feel like we don't love ourselves
enough.
And for me, if I'm doing something, I want it to have meaning. It has to have something a bit deeper than just come listen to music and go, or come watch a movie and go. A teenager might come and watch that movie and see that we had an airline, and might say, when I grow up, I'm going to revive Ghana Airways. That's a good dream. But where does a dream come from? Something has to trigger that.
Sure.
So for me, it's more than just 4 days of having
food
a good
and drinks,
time. Yes, it's 4 days of walking away with a bit more energy, with a bit more knowledge, with a bit more drive, and especially for creatives, with a bit more of a sense of responsibility, because you see what your forefathers have done, and you question yourself and you say, have I done as well? Have I done better? Or have I actually, taken us
somewhere else?
Right. Yeah.
Wow. Franka, that is so amazing. And thank you for doing this, because I think it's so important to have an event like this, because as you say, we're all in this rat race. You're working, you're taking care of your children, your family, this. We do forget where we came from and who we are. In this age of social media where you go on Instagram and you're seeing what's going on in South Korea and LA and everywhere else, but at the end of the day, we're Ghanaian and we're proudly Ghanaian, and we should celebrate our culture. And thank you so much for having this event that's going to celebrate who we are, who we were, and who we are now, and to remind us. That's really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What you thought she would hear